Lebanon has now emerged as the central flashpoint in the fragile peace memorandum between Iran and the United States.
As we have said, commitment in return for commitment. If the other side refuses to fulfill its obligations, the Islamic Republic of Iran will, in turn, take the necessary measures.
Within just 48 hours of the memorandum taking effect, Iranian sources are already threatening that missiles may be launched at Israel. This has fueled accusations that Israel, after its very public fallout with Washington over Lebanon and Iran, may have effectively sabotaged Donald Trump's peace initiative. The latest Israeli strikes in Lebanon have reportedly left more than 30 people dead, a surge in casualties that starkly contradicts talk of a ceasefire. On June 20th, reports citing Iranian sources warned that Iranian missiles could be launched at Israel, signaling that patience in Tehran is wearing thin as bombardments continue despite the memorandum. This development came even as Israel continued bombing targets in Lebanon, despite having agreed to a ceasefire with Hezbollah, a contradiction that Tehran holds up as proof of bad faith. While local media cited anonymous Iranian sources about possible missile launches, Iran's foreign ministry effectively reiterated the same message in official language, stressing that failure to comply with commitments would trigger a firm response.
Look, we did not sign this commitment for it not to be implemented. This commitment was reached after several weeks of very intensive negotiations, through the efforts of the mediators, the goodwill of Iran, and, most importantly, backed by national strength and unity. Naturally, we will spare no effort necessary to ensure its implementation. However, as we have said, commitment in return for commitment. If the other side refuses to fulfill its obligations, the Islamic Republic of Iran will, in turn, take the necessary measures. This trip is, in fact, a visit aimed at demanding that the other side fulfill its commitments. Clause 13 of the Memorandum of Understanding is very clear. Negotiations for a final agreement will begin when the implementation of the commitments set out in clauses 1, 4, 5, 10, and 11 has started and their implementation continues. Unfortunately, we are not witnessing such a situation. Therefore, during this trip and these talks, we intend to press for the implementation of the other side's commitments and to determine how exactly the other side intends to carry out its obligations. Well, the commitments are very clear. Clause 1 of the Memorandum of Understanding is the most important part of the parties' mutual commitments, namely ending the war on all fronts, including in Lebanon. We have adhered to our commitments. The other side was obliged to compel those under its influence, specifically the Zionist regime, to cease fire in Lebanon. In this regard, we have seen that they have failed to fulfill their obligations, and this constitutes a clear violation of the ceasefire understanding.
In a dramatic move, Iran also moved to shut the Strait of Hormuz, citing what it calls U.S. violations of ceasefire commitments and continued attacks on Lebanon by its ally Israel. Tehran has warned commercial vessels against approaching the crucial choke point, cautioning that their security could be at risk as the situation with the United States and Israel deteriorates again. Despite the rising tensions, subsequent reports confirm that Iran's negotiating team has departed for Switzerland, suggesting that Tehran still sees value in talks even as it escalates pressure. Talks between the United States and Iran are now expected to begin on June 21st, after initially being called off amid the crisis, indicating a last-minute push to salvage the memorandum. According to media reports, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance is expected to join the negotiations in Switzerland, underlining how high the stakes have become for Washington. Israeli strikes have reportedly killed at least 32 people in Lebanon, a spike in bloodshed that threatens to derail the Swiss summit before it even properly begins. These attacks came despite Israel having agreed to a US-mediated ceasefire with Hezbollah, raising serious doubts about the durability of any truce linked to the Iran-US memorandum. The ceasefire was announced publicly by an IDF spokesperson, but notably has not been clearly acknowledged or embraced by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, adding to the confusion and suspicion surrounding Israel's intentions.
There's a report in Axios that Netanyahu's fuming over this. Israel doesn't feel bound to the MOU as it relates to Lebanon. If, as you mentioned, your frustration with Israel striking in Beirut, hitting apartment buildings, if that continues, could it torpedo the deal? And what would the U.S.'s response be to a broader war in Lebanon involving Israel and Hezbollah?
Yeah, well, I don't want to get into hypotheticals that could torpedo the deal, because I think the president's expectation is that all of our friends, the Israelis, the Arabs in the region, we're going to work together and actually see this deal to completion. Now, I saw the Axios report. that Netanyahu is fuming. That's not reflective of the conversations that I've had with him, but maybe he's saying something to somebody else that he's not saying to me. What I will say, and this does bother me, is that you have seen people within Bibi's cabinet who have come out and attacked the deal, and in some ways very personally attacked the President of the United States. And I guess my message to them would be twofold. Number one, Donald J. Trump is the only head of state in the entire world who is sympathetic to the nation of Israel at this moment in time. And he happens to be the head of state of the world's superpower. If I was in the cabinet of the Israeli government, I might not be attacking the only powerful ally that I have anywhere left in the entire world. And the second message I would give to some of those cabinet members, Bibi, to his credit, has not gone down this path, but to some of these cabinet members in Israel who are attacking the President of the United States, the other thing that I would say is that over the last 3 months, 2/3 of the defensive weapons that have protected your homeland have been built by American hands and paid for by American tax dollars. The problem for Israel is not Donald J. Trump. And anybody in Israel who thinks their biggest problem is the President of the United States needs to wake up and smell the reality of the situation that country is in. Thank you all.
These latest remarks have further strained already fragile ties, signaling that Trump is willing to air grievances in public and that the once tightly coordinated partnership is now under visible stress. Trump again lectured Israel over its Lebanon attacks, reiterating that he is unhappy with the scale, pace, and political impact of Netanyahu's campaign against Hezbollah and Lebanese targets. Speaking from the conference stage, Trump directly criticized Netanyahu's handling of the Lebanon front, arguing that Israel's approach has been excessive, too slow, and damaging to broader U.S. diplomatic efforts. Beyond Lebanon, Trump revived his complaint that Israel allegedly pulled out of a planned strike on Qasem Soleimani, using this to suggest that Washington has repeatedly carried the heaviest risks while Israel has stepped back. He reminded his audience that it was the United States that ultimately carried out the 2020 drone strike that killed Soleimani, reinforcing his narrative that American action, not Israeli participation, delivered the decisive blow. At the same time, Trump said he agreed with Netanyahu's own admission that the US is the big partner in the relationship, making clear that Washington expects its preferences to be respected when it comes to regional wars and peace deals.
Nobody hit Soleimani. You know, when I hit Soleimani, people thought that was the biggest thing to happen in the Middle East for 50 years. That was the biggest event. He was the boss of Iran and respected, but he was a mad genius. He was a genius, the father of the roadside bomb. When you see young men, and in some cases women, mostly men, walking around without legs, without arms, with a face that's been blown to smithereens, it's Soleimani, 95%, 96.2 they say or something, 95%. That was Soleimani did it. Happened to come from Iran, and I blew him up. You remember that? I blew him up in the Valley of Death. He got off his plane and we followed him, and in all fairness, because they've been wonderful to me, Israel, but they didn't want to do that attack. They were all set. The night before the attack, they informed me they didn't want to do it. So I had to make a decision. I made the decision to do it. But it was a joint venture, as we say in the real estate business. That was a joint venture between Israel and us. We studied it for a month. We knew what plane he was going to be on. Almost a month before, he only traveled on commercial airliners, big ones with lots of people, because he knew we wouldn't shoot him down. He's very smart. But we knew he was going to be on that plane. We followed him. And then Israel informed me that they won't do it. And I had to make a decision. I had some very good generals, and not the ones you see on television, very good. And I want to thank also Pete Hegseth and General Raisin Kane, who's phenomenal. Okay, these guys are phenomenal. They can't be better. But I had some good generals, and I said to him, well, if Israel's not going to do it, we're all prepared. Do we do it? Do you like doing it or not? He said, sure. If you want to do it, we can do it. How well? We'll do it just as well or better. We can do it ourselves. We don't need anybody. So we took out Soleimani. One of the biggest events to happen in the Middle East, maybe ever, but they say 50 years, they say 100 years. I was with the Prime Minister of Pakistan. He said it's maybe the biggest event that has ever taken place. Nobody could believe it. So that's when it started. It didn't start like 3 or 4 or 5 weeks ago. And Obama wouldn't do it. What Obama did was he did the JCPOA. He loaded up a plane with $1,700,000,000 in green cash from banks all over Washington, Maryland, and Virginia. They were stripped of all their cash. They had no cash to do payrolls. It all went into a Boeing 757, a wonderful plane, and they flew it to Iran. And they gave it out to people. They bribed people. They thought they were going to get it done. Then they gave billions and billions of dollars after that. And they got a deal that was a road to a nuclear weapon. I get so angry, I guess. I'm allowed to get angry when I watch the Democrats. They talk about it all the time. We had this deal done. You had a deal that was going to give them, legally, a nuclear weapon. And if that happened, Israel would have been blown away. And in all fairness to Bibi Netanyahu, who happens to be a good man, gets a little excited sometimes. But he happens to be a very good man. We've had an amazing partnership. He's been an amazing prime minister. We have a little dispute over Lebanon. I say, you can do a little softer touch, Bibi. You don't have to knock down a building every time somebody walks into it that's from Hezbollah. But it's been an amazing partnership. But he will say, we're the big partner, and he's the very small partner, and that's true.
Relations have taken a sharp dive since Netanyahu ordered new strikes on Lebanon on June 14th. A move that clashed directly with US efforts to lock in a truce and finalize memorandum with Iran. Those attacks landed just as Washington and Tehran were finalizing their memorandum of understanding to end the conflict, making Israel's actions look like a direct challenge to US diplomacy. Once the deal was announced, Israel quickly asked Washington for a copy of the memorandum, seeking to understand exactly what had been agreed between the US and Iran behind closed doors. The US initially turned down that request, deepening Israeli frustration, before Trump later revealed that Washington had eventually sent a copy, though by then the political damage and mistrust were already evident.